All right, ready to dive deep into something I think we all kind of secretly think about? Like, what if we could live forever?
You mean immortality?
Exactly, immortality. We're looking at this report literally called The Quest for Immortality, unveiling the science, ethics, and future of eternal life. It's a wild ride.
Well, before we can even think about living forever, you got to figure out why we age in the first place, right?
Yeah.
And the report goes into the nitty-gritty science of it.
Yeah, it's not as simple as just like time passing, is it?
No, not at all. It's happening at the cellular level, all sorts of things going
Like
on.
those telomeres I read about.
Ah, the telomeres, yeah. Think of them like the little plastic tips on your shoelaces.
Okay, to stop them from fraying.
Exactly. Every time a cell divides, the telomere gets a little bit shorter.
Yeah.
And eventually, it's so short the cell just can't divide anymore. That's part of how we age.
Huh. So it's like a built-in timer on our cells.
You could say that. But the report also mentions that scientists are looking into ways to actually make those telomeres longer, maybe slow that whole process down.
No kidding. So we could kind of rewind the clock on our cells.
That's the idea, but that's just one piece of it. There's also this thing called cellular senescence. Basically, cells get old and stop working right.
Like a car engine that's been running too long.
Perfect analogy. Gets all rusty, doesn't work as well.
So we've got these telomere shortening, cells getting rusty. So is it all downhill from there? Like, is how long we live just determined by our DNA?
Genetics definitely matter, but it's not the whole story. The report actually emphasizes that lifestyle choices make a huge difference. Like what you eat, how much you exercise, even stress levels, all that impacts how fast we age.
So it's not all doom and gloom then. We have some control over it.
Absolutely. It's not just about the genes you're born with, it's what you do with them, you know?
That's actually pretty encouraging. But, okay, even if we're living super healthy, we're still aging. And that's where the report gets really interesting because it goes into the science of actually fighting aging. And some of it sounds like straight up sci-fi.
Oh yeah, we're not just talking about living longer. The focus is on extending what they call health span. Living longer, but in good health, that's the key.
Makes way more sense than just being like 150 years old and barely able to move.
Right. So how do we do that? Well, one of the big things the report talks about is genetic engineering. Specifically, this technology called CRISPR. It's like a super precise tool for editing genes.
I've heard of CRISPR, but it always sounds so futuristic.
It is cutting edge, but the potential is huge. Imagine being able to actually edit out genes that cause diseases, especially the ones that come with getting older.
Like literally rewriting the code of life.
Exactly. And the report also talks about stem cell therapy, another really promising avenue.
Stem cells, yeah. What's the potential there?
Think about it, replacing organs that are damaged with brand new ones, grown from your own cells.
Oh, so it's like getting a whole new engine for that sputtering car we were talking about.
Pretty much. And then there's nanobots, which is where things get really sci-fi sounding.
Nanobots. Like tiny robots inside us, fixing things.
You got it. Imagine that, like tiny little mechanics constantly repairing and maintaining your cells from the inside. They could even target those old senescent cells and get rid of them.
Okay, now that's just wild. It seems like instead of just slowing down aging, we're trying to reverse it, like totally hack the human body.
It is a bit like hacking the system, yeah. But then the report takes this whole other turn and it starts talking about digital immortality.
Wait, digital immortality, what does that even mean?
Things like mind uploading, taking your consciousness and putting it into a computer. It makes you wonder, what does it even mean to be human anymore?
Right, it's like we're not just talking about biology anymore, it's philosophy, it's everything.
And then there's virtual reality, where you could, theoretically, live forever in these digital worlds.
Okay, so now we're really in science fiction territory. But even if we could do all this, would we even want to? I mean, living forever in a computer, doesn't that kind of defeat the purpose?
That's the thing, right? It's not just about the can we, but the should we. And that's where the ethics of all this becomes super important.
Yeah, because some of this stuff, it's not just science, it's messing with what it means to be human. But before we get into all that, I want to bring it back to the science for a minute. The report talks about some actual drugs that are being studied right now for anti-aging.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of research happening on that front. One of the most promising areas is in senolytics.
Senolytics, huh? What are those?
Remember those rusty senescent cells we talked about? Well, senolytics are drugs that specifically target and eliminate those cells, stops them from causing more damage.
Like a cellular cleanup crew.
Exactly. And instead of just slowing down aging, these drugs could potentially reverse some of the damage that's already happened.
Now, that sounds promising. Are they, like, available now? Can I go get some?
Not quite yet. They're still
Hmm.
in clinical trials. Initial results are good, but we need more research to be sure they're safe and effective in the long term. Can't rush these things.
Right, safety first.
Yeah.
Makes sense. I think the report also mentioned a couple other drugs, rapamycin and metformin, that are being looked at for anti-aging effects.
Yeah, those are interesting ones. Rapamycin was originally for preventing organ rejection after transplants, but they found it might have effects on lifespan. And metformin's a diabetes drug, but now they're studying it for slowing down aging in general.
It's crazy how a drug could be, for one thing, then turn out to have all these other benefits you didn't expect.
It shows how much we still don't know, and how connected different areas of medicine can be.
It's like scientists are coming at this aging problem from every angle. Gene editing, stem cells, nanobots, drugs. It's a full-on assault on aging.
You could say that, yeah. It's amazing, though, isn't it, just how much research is going on in this whole anti-aging field. But like we were saying before, it's not just about the science, right? The quest for immortality, it brings up all these ethical questions, too. And the report, it really gets into some of those big dilemmas we got to think about.
Yeah, it's easy to get caught up in all the cool science and forget about the potential downsides. Like, one that really jumped out at me was the whole social inequality thing. I mean, if these treatments to live longer are super expensive, won't that just create a bigger gap between the rich and everyone else? You could end up with this society where only the wealthy can afford to live longer.
Exactly. That's a real concern. Imagine people with money could potentially live for centuries while everyone else is still aging and dying like we do now. It'd make the inequalities we already have with healthcare, education, everything even worse.
It's almost like a dystopian movie or something. You've got these immortal, super rich ruling over everyone else.
Right. And it's not just about access to treatments either. Think about the impact on things like Social Security, retirement, even the job market. How do those systems work if people are living way longer?
Yeah, the whole structure of society would have to change.
Completely. We'd have to rethink all the rules because that whole idea that everyone's got a limited lifespan, it kind of goes out the window.
Okay, so social inequality is a big one. But what about the impact on the planet itself? More people, living longer, that's got to put a strain on resources, right? More pollution, everything. Could the Earth even handle that?
That's another major issue the report brings up. Sustainability is already a huge challenge, and if we add extended lifespans to the mix, it definitely makes things more complicated. We'd need to find ways to seriously reduce our environmental impact if we want to avoid some kind of ecological disaster.
It's like this whole quest for immortality is forcing us to face the reality of how much we're affecting the planet and how we need to change things.
Exactly. But it goes beyond just the practical stuff, too. The report also gets into these really deep philosophical questions, like what happens to the whole idea of the meaning of life if death isn't a thing anymore?
Right, like does life even have meaning if it just goes on forever?
It's something philosophers have been debating for centuries. Some say that it's the fact that our lives are finite, that they end, that makes them meaningful, makes every moment precious. So if you take that away, does life become meaningless?
It's a really trippy thought. If we knew we had unlimited time, would we still appreciate each day as much? Would we even be motivated to do anything?
It's hard to say for sure how humans would react, but it definitely raises questions about our nature, how we perceive time, all that. And the report also touches on the ethics of messing with natural aging in the first place. Some people believe that aging and death are just part of the natural cycle, and we shouldn't try to change that.
It's like, are we playing God by trying to rewrite those rules?
Right. But then again, throughout history, humans have always pushed the limits and tried to overcome our limitations. That's how we've made progress.
It's a tough one. Like, where do you draw the line?
It's a balancing act for sure. We have this instinct to explore, to innovate, but we also have a responsibility to think about the consequences, both good and bad. And this quest for immortality, it forces us to confront that tension head on.
It feels like we're standing at this fork in the road. One path leads to a future where people are living way longer with all the good and the bad that comes with that. The other path is where we are now, where aging and death are just part of life. So which way do we go?
That's the big question, isn't it? And maybe it's not just a simple either choice. Maybe there's a middle ground, a way to use these new technologies to improve our health and well-being without necessarily trying to live forever.
That makes sense. Maybe the goal shouldn't be immortality, but just living the best life we can for as long as we naturally can.
Right, focusing on quality of life over quantity. But even if that's the goal, those ethical questions we were talking about, they don't just disappear. We still need to figure out how to make sure these life-extending technologies are available to everyone, how to deal with the impact on the planet, all that.
It's like we're entering this whole new territory, and we have no map. We've got these amazing tools, but we got to be careful how we use them.
Absolutely. This whole idea of immortality, it's not just about science. It's about understanding ourselves better, our values, what kind of future we want to build.
It's been a really thought-provoking conversation so far. We've gone from the science of aging to these mind-blowing technologies to these huge ethical questions. But there's one more thing I'm curious about. What about the future of this whole quest for immortality?
Yeah, the report actually gets into that too. Like, can we really achieve immortality, or is it just a pipe dream? That's what we'll be looking at in the final part of our deep dive into the quest for immortality.
Okay, so we've talked about the science, the ethics, all that. But now, the big question. What's next? Like, what does the future really hold for this whole immortality thing? Is it actually going to happen, or are we just chasing some impossible dream?
Well, the report doesn't sugarcoat things. It says straight up that true immortality, living forever, might be more sci-fi than reality, at least for now. But that doesn't mean we're not going to see some big changes in how long people can live.
So maybe not forever, but still living way longer than we do now. What would that even look like?
There are a few different paths the report talks about. One that's super interesting is the idea of using combination therapies, like hitting the aging process from all sides.
So instead of just focusing on one thing, like gene editing, it's more like a multi-pronged attack.
Exactly. Scientists think that by combining different approaches, they could get a much bigger effect, like using gene editing to fix damaged genes, stem cell therapy to regrow tissues, and then senolytics to clear out those bad cells. It's like giving your body the ultimate tune-up.
That's something I can get behind. And speaking of futuristic stuff, the report also mentions this idea of like merging humans with machines. Is that where we're headed? Cyborgs and all that.
It's definitely a wild concept. Some experts think that as technology gets even more advanced, we might be able to integrate our consciousness with machines, basically breaking free from the limits of our physical bodies.
Then like our minds could keep going even after our bodies are gone.
That's the idea. But it raises some really deep questions, like would that digital consciousness even be us? Or just some copy?
Right. Is it even possible to capture what makes a person unique in a computer?
That's a debate that's still going on. It gets into what consciousness, even IS, you know? There are no easy answers there.
It seems like the more we learn about this stuff, the more questions pop up. So based on everything we've talked about, what do you think is the most realistic scenario for the future? Like, is it really possible to extend life that much?
Well, I think we got to be clear about what we're talking about. Immortality, living forever, that's one thing. But radical life extension, living significantly longer, that's another. And while I don't think true immortality is happening anytime soon, I do think radical life extension is a real possibility, maybe even within this century. The research happening with gene editing, stem cells, anti-aging drugs, it's moving incredibly fast. I wouldn't be surprised if we start seeing people living healthy, active lives well past 100 in the next few decades.
That's pretty mind-blowing to think about. But like we said before, all those ethical questions, they become even bigger if people are living that much longer. How do we even prepare for a world where people are living to 150 or even older?
It's going to require a huge shift in how we think about everything. Social structures, economic systems, healthcare, education, work, everything. It's not just about adding more years. It's about making sure those years are good years. You know, making sure people have purpose, meaning, all that.
It sounds like we're on the edge of something totally new here, like a whole new chapter for humanity where we're redefining what it means to age and what it means to live.
Exactly. It's exciting, it's a little scary, but it's definitely something we have to approach carefully.
We got to be smart about it. Well, it's been amazing exploring all this with you. Who knows, maybe someday we'll look back on this and be amazed at how much we've learned about aging and about life itself.
Or maybe we'll be listening to this as digital consciousnesses, thinking about all the choices that led us here. Either way, it's clear that this whole quest for immortality is far from over. And the future? Well, the future's wide open.
And that's a good place to leave it, I think. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the quest for immortality. Keep those questions coming, keep exploring, and we'll see you next time.